Something I've been thinking about recently, in part because I played something, it's kind of cold, that really nailed it home for me, which was John Company. And I really liked the game, but I noticed something about it, which was the design relied on a certain obscurantism, in which what you want to do, what your actions effects will be, all of that is kind of hidden in the game. And not really hidden in terms of you really don't know what is going to happen, but hidden in the sense that the effects of the mechanisms aren't immediately apparent, but as you begin to work them out and understand them better, you're going to get you're going to get to a point where they're not hidden from you anymore. You do understand how to manipulate them properly. And this is something that I think is rather common amongst Euro style games, where especially the more modern ones, but honestly, even some of the very clever designs, things like Tigris and Euphrates and Carcassonne, what you immediately and kind of intrinsically think of as, hey, this is what I want to do, may not be the correct thing, right? So there are certainly games that I really enjoy, and I think John Company might be one of them, but there are many, many games that I really enjoy, where there is a certain obfuscation of what you want to be doing, what things are obvious, what you need to react with, and that can be a lot of fun to discover and suss out. And any game, no matter what the game is going to have something that's hidden from the players. Otherwise, it's nothing but a trivial puzzle, right? It's completely calculable. Something I really despise, right? So, if you're playing a game of chess or Go, that hidden thing is perhaps not the rules, which are fairly simple, but although the application of them isn't necessarily, and there are things there that you discover through play. But in general, you kind of understand what you're supposed to be doing, right? More or less. But rather your opponent's intentions. And where I start to get worried, where things really don't work for me, is when that obscurantism ends up as sort of the prime feature of the game, is trying to figure out how the game actually works. And then once you've done that, well, what more is there? Well, it depends on the game. With an 18xx game, which I'm playing right now, there's a certain level of, gosh, when you first approach it, how does this all work? What am I trying to, how do I make money? What are the things I have to do? Do I have to make money early in the game, or can I build for the long term? Questions like that come to mind, and they're not always immediately obvious what the answers are going to be. Answer, my friends. Where I think it doesn't go well is where, okay, we've figured out how these mechanisms work, and there's not that much more left there, Once you kind of understand how to manipulate those mechanisms. Now, the problem that I have is that if you lay those mechanisms on too thickly, and they don't relate directly and intrinsically to sort of intuitional ideas of how the processes work in the real world that's being modeled. So you can't just play by instinct, you know. Hey, I'm playing a stock market game. I want to buy low and sell high, right? You know, that seems like a good idea. How do I make that happen? Well, I start looking into that particular element of it. When it just kind of comes down to the victory point mash and trying, you know, to understand what kind of amounts to something like an abstract algebra, it just doesn't really relate to anything that you can link to terribly well. There I really want that obscurantism to be as little as possible, which is to say, to some extent, you need to, you know, players are going to need the challenge of figuring out how to use the rules. But to the other side of it, you don't want that to get in the way. You don't want that to be too big a hurdle to being able to play it enjoyably with someone else. Now, the more a game tells a story, the more it kind of detracts from it. The more a game is linked to reality and you can make these intuitive decisions and they have results that make sense to you, the less you have to worry about those mechanisms. And in fact, with those games, what I end up seeing is a lot of us, myself included, consider sort of trying to use the mechanism of the game to be something gamey. And that's a bad thing, right? You know, you're no longer using the model to express real-world objectives through real-world decision-making that, you know, should apply to that model. Instead, you're trying to find the tricks of the mechanism. Now, that's where it gets tricky. That's where, you know, it usually falls apart for me with the Euros. If I'm playing something and I'm looking too hard at the tricks of the mechanism, A, it takes away from the story. B, it stops being a model. But it also, and probably the most important of all, just kind of frustrates and annoys me, you know, because I've got this clash of expectations going on. And I think that's really where I sit in dislike of a lot of the modern heavier Euros. When a game is abstract enough and it's got a kind of simple set of rules, and there may be a lot of emergent complexity and trying to understand how the mechanism works in all these ways and how you best take advantage of it. I don't mind that so much, you know. I don't mind a game that has simple rules with consequences that maybe you didn't see right away, especially in the abstract realm. But I do mind when it does rub against, say, the topic that the game purports to represent as a model. You know, if I can do something that seems bogus, right, under you know, any kind of vision of reality that I have that the game's trying to model, then, you know, obviously there's a problem there. It's no longer being the representational game. Now, with a lot of Euros, you kind of look at it and you say, well, it really kind of isn't representing anything at all. This is just theme here. It's not a modeling of the subject matter. And what I see is a lot of these games have a lot of theme on them, and not a lot of connection to the subject. in the same way. And I gotta say things like, I don't know, Mage Knight comes to mind here, where some of the things that you're doing just feel, I don't know, a little disconnected. And it just, I don't know, it just really kind of rubs me the wrong way. But that has, enough of a connection that it's more just the work and the effort involved that really kills me there. And it's kind of funny, because I think my tastes have evolved on this, or actually, I think what's happened is I've been overwhelmed with games that are trying to have clever obscurantism in place to prevent you from easily understanding how to win them, So I remember some of the early games that had neat tricks to them that I really, really liked. One that came to mind, Republic of Rome. In Republic of Rome, one of the things that you might do is nominate people one after the other who are all going to fail, because nobody can come to any kind of agreement. Nobody's got any kind of deal, and leave the last remaining candidate as the person you really want to succeed. Now, you got to be careful with this, because people will see what you're doing, but you might be able to slip somebody in who's not that important that you want to be there. And then they automatically win the nomination, the election process, because everyone else has been shot down. And it doesn't matter whether or not they would be even more disliked than some of the others. You might be able to get something. So that's the kind of tricky little mechanism that at one point I really kind of said, ooh, I really like this. But now, things that are more and more like that no longer stand out as, oh wow, that's so cool that I can pull this trick off, this gamey little trick that it's intentional and everything, but not everybody's going to be aware of it, going into the game. And more I've wanted it to be more, the things that I think the obscurity should come from are, what are my overall intentions, not how am I going to sort of tactically manipulate the system at a very low level. And how those interact in a very broad sort of sense. That sort of attracts me more now. There's always been, look, I played a game of Talluvula or something like that, Talluva, where I thought I had this really clever little strategy, and then I was so impressed that I got wiped out of the game, actually, because my clever little strategy kind of backfired on me in a way that I hadn't expected that it was possible. In part because I didn't really, didn't really push, hey, what happens if this? But yeah, and that, when you see these kind of circumstances where something really weird happens in the game and it's so awesome and everything, those still do bring joy to me, because they become their own kind of story, as opposed, and this is a pure abstract basically. They become their own kind of story instead of the story that might support the theme particularly, because they don't connect to anything that you could even postulate. You can't even hand wave this one away, but it just works out to be oh look, I've managed to lose the game because I was doing too well at my strategy. One case kind of like that is, for example, the draw conditions in checkers. If nobody can make a move, it's over, right? I think it's a draw. Maybe a lose. If you can't make a move, it's over, and you lost. I don't remember. It's been so long since I've played checkers at all. It's actually a pretty interesting game. It doesn't matter that it's solved or not. I play everything at a very low level. It's got to be tic-tac-toe for me to, have a problem with the fact that, yeah, it's obvious I can avoid this. What a game shouldn't have is such a high barrier of that obscurantism that, you play a game of it and you're still not maybe absolutely sure that you understand even how the mechanisms work. But I don't know, again, go. The patterns are almost the mechanisms. And that obviously is not only a fantastic game, but one that attracts me. Chess, I can't say as much about chess because the thinking to that doesn't please me as much, or much at all. But yeah, I'm left beginning to realize that it's not that attempt to kind of hide what the effects are can sometimes be pleasing even to me. But that is often the thing that I feel I really despise about so many of the Euros, and especially the point salad-y type things, where, you have this whole set of different conflicting mechanisms in play, and you can't quite judge which one's going to work best. So it's kind of an interesting thing, because some of the times that gaminess, especially when it's really celebrated in the game, is appealing to me, and in other cases it really gets on my nerves. And I don't know where the special magic mix is. I just noted while I was playing, this one game, John Company, that, wow, these mechanisms, and we'll see, I've got a copy coming that, I want to get on video fairly soon. We'll see how, maybe while I'm playing it under video, I'll be able to put it under a better microscope there. But the point is, you need something that the players need to discover. And it could be like in a game of diplomacy, what are your real intentions of the other players? Not that there aren't some funky ass things you can do in diplomacy tactically with the movement of pieces. There really are. And some of those amaze the hell out of me when I see them. I'm not just saying, oh, somebody else surprises me with this. I'm saying, I look and I see it, and for the first time that I see it, and it's always the first time because, this memory doesn't hold very well, at least for these kind of things, it really kind of astounds me, and I'm like, oh, that's so cool. But it wouldn't be so cool if I was playing a war game that's attempting to simulate something, and I found some neat little trick like that. That would piss the hell out of me. So it kind of depends on how much representation there really is, how much representation I believe there is, or any given player, as opposed to how much it's just the mechanisms. And I also think that if you overload the mechanisms and make it too much an obscurity through just mess, clutter and chaos, that doesn't please me. The only way that pleases me is if the chaos and the mess is so unmanageable, so large, that really what it's doing is it's saying, you're not capable of figuring this out. And you're not capable of figuring this out completely. So you're going to have to go on your instincts. You're going to have to go on military principles and stuff like that. Because, honestly, it's really trying to model something real, so it's really complex. The more you abstract away, the less of that reality you get. And I think the more opportunity for that kind of game is. Especially since the players who are there are more likely to be searching for that trick to win them the thing, and are less likely to be ashamed of doing so. Another place where It exists outside of the diplomacy and the intent, and the rule structure itself is randomness. You don't know what the die roll is going to be, right? You don't know what cards your opponent's holding and whether he's bluffing or not. Things like that. So something has to be hidden from you as the player. And to some extent, some of the mechanism effects can be fun to discover, especially really, really rare and odd effects and how they interact. But you can definitely load that on too much for my taste. And I think that's at the heart, maybe, of where I see more modern game designs going wrong, is that they go too far in that. They go to the point where it might take several plays to kind of start understanding how all of this actually interacts at all. And it's a fine line between, one of the things is the optimal Go game isn't about out-patterning your opponent. The optimal Go game is about out-strategizing them, making better choices on the full board. Unfortunately, I'm not good enough for that. But it still holds my interest in a way that I don't know. But anyway, I thought I'd babble a little bit on this because it's been troubling me a little bit recently. Up we go.